America! This is Samantha Marzi reporting live from the JMS studios at 7, your go-to place for news. Today's special report is on the Bill of Rights. With the help from the news reporters Mindy Duggan and Jess Diargo, we will be telling you about cases in which different amendments may have been neglected in modern day. Then we will talk about what amendments mean today. To start, I will tell you a little bit about the Bill of Rights. It is the first 10 amendments in the Constitution that outlines the rights of the people. These rights are still very important today and can be interpreted in many ways because they mean different things in the past. To start our special report, let's talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, religion, and press, with Mindy. Hello, Mindy.
Good morning, Sam.
What news report do you have to tell us about the First Amendment?
Well, you see, Sammy, I have a story from early this October about how some people seek refuge in America because of our religious freedom. 42-year-old Echo Liu practices Falun Gong, a spiritual practice that involves meditation and a mindset on truthfulness. She began practicing it while she was a journalist in Beijing in 1997. Then, in 1999, Falun Gong was banned in China in fear that it was becoming a cult. After years of being arrested and forced to watch propaganda films about Falun, Echo was finally able to come to America, where she freely practices it.
So this shows how the United States gives protection to those who are persecuted for their religion, correct?
Yes.
To me this amendment is pretty straightforward, and I feel that it means the same thing as it did when the Constitution was written.
I agree. While there are always limits on things, it is pretty easy to see how far this amendment goes.
Thank you, Mindy. Now let's talk about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Simply, the right is that citizens are allowed to own guns, and that is the news story I have today. In June 2008, D.C. police officer Dick Heller had a gun on the job, but wanted to register for a handgun to keep at home, but the district refused. At this point in time, having an unregistered firearm was illegal, but registration for a handgun was also prohibited. Heller sued the District of Columbia for the reason that this was against the Second Amendment to prohibit citizens from buying firearms. Heller won the case, and now it is legal to register a handgun in D.C. This is a case in which the simple right of owning a gun was violated, but today there are many ways in which this right could be interpreted. Back when the Constitution was written, the only guns were muskets. Now, there are hundreds of different types of guns, including handguns, semi-automatic, and automatic guns. The big question is whether gun rights should be limited or if rights should stay true to the Constitution, which states that gun rights shall not be limited in any way. This debate is very big right now with the presidential elections coming up, but there is still no sure answer to how this amendment should be interpreted. The Third Amendment is the housing of soldiers. Here to explain this one with me is Jess. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning, Sammy! Yes, the Third Amendment says that soldiers are not allowed to live in the house of someone without their consent. It was made before the U.S. had won its independence from England. British soldiers used to live in the houses of the colonists, and the colonists did not want them there. The right was made to protect them from this ever happening again.
Nowadays, this is unnecessary due to the fact that the military has its own bases, correct?
Yes, but the story I have for you still to do with this.
What's your story?
Well, in the 1970s, the U.S. built a military base on an island in Iceland. Only after the entire population of the island were forced to move out. The island was their home, and they were forced out. 40 years later, the old inhabitants were hoping to be allowed to go back to their homeland and just live next to the base because there was no doubt that the base would keep running. While this is not in America, it still connects to the Third Amendment in the ways that it was Americans who had kicked them out, and the soldiers were living in their home, with the old inhabitants not wanting them there.
That makes sense, but otherwise the Third Amendment is never brought up anymore. It doesn't do much, correct?
Yes, truthfully, the Third Amendment could be gone away with, and nothing would change.
Thank you! On to the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is about search and arrest warrants. It says that the police cannot search people's homes, effects, or their own person without the police having probable cause or search warrant given by a judge. Mindy is back with us to talk about it.
Hello again. The Fourth Amendment is very important because it protects people's privacy. This right is very important in trials also, because if the police do not go through the right procedures, they can lose an entire case, even if they know the person is guilty.
Really? Do you have an example of this?
Yes. In April 2015, a man was pulled over for driving into a median. The police gave him a warning, but then asked to search his car. The man refused, but the police searched his car anyways. They found drugs in the back and arrested the man and his passenger. But when the case went to court, all charges were dropped and the man went free.
Why were the charges dropped?
Well, you see, Sammy, in order for the police to search the car, they had to have a probable cause, like if they smelled drugs or the man was driving recklessly. The problem was that the police had no probable cause, so there was no reason for them to search the car. Their search violated the Fourth Amendment, which allowed for the case to be dropped.
Very interesting. It seems to me that the interpretation from 1789 is pretty much the same in that the evidence is needed to search for the search to happen. Thanks, Mindy. The amendment covers the rights in criminal cases. Most people know it from the phrase, "I plead the Fifth," because the amendment gives people the right to not answer any questions or say anything that might self-incriminate them. An example of when pleading the Fifth was used was with Lois Lerner. She was called 2 times to testify about potential IRS abuses. Both times, she used the Fifth Amendment and refused to answer any questions about the ordeal. Because of this, Lerner has not admitted or denied anything, so the nonprofit organization suing her does not have enough evidence yet to bring her to court and win. I feel that the interpretation of the Fifth Amendment today is more of a way to get out of talking and answering questions that might get you in trouble versus the original reason for it, which was to protect the people during trials and help them stay free. Back to Jessica now to talk about the Sixth Amendment. Hello, Jess.
Hi, Sammy.
The Sixth Amendment deals with the right to a fair trial, more specifically, the right to a speedy and public trial.
Yes, the Sixth Amendment in the court is the trial of the private first class Bradley Manning. Manning leaked out thousands of private documents about war operations online, and he was arrested in May 2010 and was in confinement until February 2013, when his trial was. His authority filling a motion saying that the case should be dropped because Manning's right to a speedy trial under the Sixth Amendment was neglected. While this motion was denied and Manning's was convicted, it still shows how the Sixth Amendment is so important.
Today, the Sixth Amendment is interpreted as a way to make sure people that may be guilty are not kept in pretrial confinement for too long, which is the same as when the Constitution was written. Thank you, Jess, for that story. The Seventh Amendment is about rights in civil cases, which are trials that involve suing and other non-criminal cases. Once again, Mindy is here to explain this amendment.
Hello. The Seventh Amendment gives you the right for the common people to settle disputes in court. An example of this is the story of the aunt who sued her nephew. When he hugged her in 2008, he set both of them to the ground, breaking her wrist. While this seems bad, it's actually a problem with the insurance company causing her to sue, not the fact that he broke her wrist. The end of the trial was in early October 2015, and the jury voted in favor of the nephew. This case shows that almost silly cases like this are allowed to go to court if needed to settle things.
The Seventh Amendment seems to protect the right of settling expensive problems in a civil way, and for these problems to be solved with a jury. To me, the interpretation is very similar to the original reason of protecting the rights of civil cases.
It looks that way to me.
Thank you. Now back to Jess to help me with the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment is about bills, fines, and punishments, and protect those who are found guilty from excessive bails, excessive fines, and cruel and unusual punishments.
An example of a cruel and unusual punishment that this amendment tries to prevent is the story of Glenn Ford. Mr. Ford was wrongly convicted of murder in 1983 and was sentenced to death. For 30 years, he sat on death row in solitary confinement in a 5 by 7 foot cell in the infamous jail Angola, where the summer temperatures sometimes reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit, accompanied by the harsh penalties. Recently, new evidence found that Ford was innocent and had spent 30 years in horrible conditions for no reason. The conditions and punishments to Ford can be considered cruel, paired with the fact that he was innocent.
The Eighth Amendment is there to protect people like Glenn Ford, but sadly a few punishments slip through. Following this amendment has been many laws about when the death penalty should be administered, helping the amendment stay strong. I believe the reason for this amendment now is the same as it was originally, to protect those found guilty from unfair punishment. Thank you, Jess. The Ninth Amendment states that the amendments written are not the only rights of the people. One example of this is the right of privacy to a woman, which means that it's a woman's own right to have an abortion. Mindy will explain this more.
23-year-old Kenlisa Jones's right under the Ninth Amendment that she is allowed to have an abortion was infringed upon. Her right is to have an abortion and for it to be her personal business. When a social worker told the police that she had an abortion using quote-unquote dangerous drugs, she was wrongly arrested. In reality, the drugs were legal abortion medication. In Georgia, where she lives, it is perfectly legal to have an abortion, so there was no reason for her arrest. This violates the right under the Ninth Amendment to a woman's privacy.
The Ninth Amendment allows for other rights to happen, including the right to basic education and the right to refuse unwanted medical treatment. I believe that this interpretation that the Ninth Amendment would protect the rights not written down is the same now as it was in 1789.
I feel the Ninth Amendment was a way for colonists to protect their rights in the future, as it has done now.
Yes, thank you, Mindy. On to the final amendment, the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is the right that any powers not given to the federal government go to the states. A good example of this is when the states have power over driver licenses. Because when the Constitution was written, there was no cars, so there was nothing to write about in the Constitution. Once again, Jess is with us to explain.
Yes, the 10th Amendment is all about how any powers not specifically given to the federal government or denied to the states go to the states. A time when this was almost forgotten was when President Obama's edict also allowed illegal immigrants who had no choice in coming to America to have certain rights. This included their right to get a driver's license. Right away, Arizona saw problems with this, including the cost and dangers. But also, the fact that Obama was trying to make an edict involving driver's license, which were exclusively the state's power, Arizona was using the 10th Amendment as a way to stop this edict, and were issuing laws based on the state's laws, even if they don't go against the president's edict.
To me, the 10th Amendment is the way to not let the federal government get too powerful with so many powers. And that is why it was originally written into the Constitution. Thank you, Jess. This concludes today's special report on the Bill of Rights. Almost all of the amendments can be interpreted the same way as they were written in the Constitution. While the United States of America has changed a lot, the Bill of Rights has not. Special thanks to Mindy and Jess for helping with today's report. This has been Samantha Marzi from JMS News at 7 saying, have a great day, America. Now back to Hackett for the weather. The bloopers are coming! The bloopers are coming! Good morning, Mindy.
Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Mindy. Good
The
morning.
amendment is the right to bear arms. Simply, this right is that...
It looks like you're looking in a corner.
Starts working out at the song.
And the twilight lies gleaming. Balloon gong. A spiritual.
What are you doing? Jess, what are you doing? You look good and you're like, I will need to quit.
I saw that.
Jess, what was that right at the beginning? You're like, I know, you're like this. You're like, enough. Jess. You can't just say tacos.
Why can't I?
Okay, the right of owning a gun was violated, but there, I can't use the word violated.
Oh yeah.
You can use it there. Good, Mom! Seventh Amendment. People. One example of this is the right to privacy.
Do you have anything?
Used to live in the houses of the colonists. I can't even talk.
It's colonists.
Colonists. I can't talk. Colonists. Freedom from England. British soldiers used to live in the colony. Stop it! Fahrenheit. Accompanied. Accompanied by the harsh penalties. I don't even know how to say penalties. Penalties? You had to reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit, accompanied by the harsh penalties. I can't even say that word.
Penalties.
Penalties!
So hard about penalties.
Do we